It's the 29th of March 2022 and we're still celebrating International Women's Month here on CTV. Welcome, I'm Amelia Martha Nachtimbo, and like we promised you at the beginning of the month, we're still holding conversations with people, specialists and experts who are shining a light on matters that affect women in our community and how they can help to bridge the gender divide. Today, we're talking about a very interesting topic, crimes of passion. Well, I recently found out that most of the women who are in prison, it's because they are implicated in matters to do with murder relating to their partners. And with me, I have a very interesting panel that will be helping us to understand and break that down. Council Komaket Job, welcome and thanks for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much.
And we also have Council Asia from Justice Defenders. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Yes, so I'll go very straight to the point. But before that, we have a tradition here on Month of the Woman. We always want to know our guests and we get to know them even better. Very quickly, can you tell us, how did you get into advocacy? I'll start with you, Asia.
Thank you, Martha. My name is Asia Mbatabi. I am an advocate and I currently practice with Justice Defenders, Kampala. I am so passionate. The reason that drove me to advocacy is entirely because I am so passionate about criminal justice. I am so passionate about empowering the vulnerable community. And how do I do the empowering? By conducting impact litigation in court, by doing advocacy at the community level, at the prison level. Yes.
Right. Is that something that you had always wanted to do growing up?
Yes, this is something I'd always, at the law school, I always wanted to empower women, particularly women, even men, but empower women. I've always wanted to ensure that justice is administered.
Right.
Yes.
Women, is there something that happened when you were growing up where you thought it should be the women, where you got that passion from?
Usually when in a community as we were growing up, you usually see some families that are experiencing domestic violence. You see women that are being affected in homes, women that are holding up into marriages simply because of the pressure from the society, the norm that when you're married, when you're in a relationship, you're not supposed to leave that marriage as a woman. So when I was growing up, I used to see such kind of women. So I made it a point that when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. And when I become a lawyer, I want to ensure that there is justice for these women.
Okay, and on a scale of 1 to 10, like 1 being there, where would you say your journey is so far towards achieving that dream of being there for women?
At the moment, I can say maybe I am still at maybe a 3%. I am still furthering this journey.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's still a long way to go, and that gives us hope because that means there's more work to be done.
Yes, but I'm still on it,
yeah,
and I'm sure
that you'll achieve, and you'll be telling us a lot more as the show progresses. Council Komaket, if I may come to you, also passionate about human rights and criminal justice. Did you always want to be a lawyer when you were growing up?
Not really. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a doctor.
Prestigious job.
And I was basically motivated by the husband of the minister responsible for health. That is Dr. Ochero.
Yeah.
The wife is called Acheng.
Right.
But along the way, things change. But what I can basically say is that I had a mother. I'm having sisters. I have a daughter. So along the way, you basically understand that you have to advocate for the rights of women. Not because they are less, but because the society or the system seems to have let them down.
Yeah.
So that was driving me.
So the women in your life have taken you on this journey of advocacy and fighting for human rights.
Yes, and I've basically told my wife that, and I tell people that I can disagree with my wife, but I cannot disrespect her.
Right, that's a very powerful statement. You can disagree with your wife, but you cannot disrespect her. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, someone brought to my attention the fact that majority of the women who are inmates that we have, I think especially in the Luzira prisons, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, are there because they're implicated in crimes of passion. And if we can take a look at some of the statistics that we got from Uganda prisons, the occupancy, I think the women are just at 4.4%. That was as of January 2022. I think, Councillor Asia, you mentioned to me earlier that the number had been a little higher in December at about 5%. And also, we'll have a graphic that will be showing us the breakdown of all the numbers, those who are on remand, those who are convicts, and what that means. So you're the one, according to your work, you're the one who is always visiting Luzira maximum prisons. If you can help us get an idea, out of this 4.4%, who is just like about 1,000 women who are in prison right now, what percentage falls towards crimes of passion and then the other crimes? Just an estimate, because we may not have the exact figures right now.
Yes, thank you, Martha. I'll give a rough estimate. Let's say if particularly Luzira prison, Luzira prison has 4 prisons within it. Yeah. We have Maction Bay, we have Luzira Upper, we have Kampala Remand. Those are entirely men, and we have Luzira women. If you look at the lockup for all these prisons, you may find that the total lockup for women is usually around 600 to 700. And if you to compare it with the total lockup for Kampala Remand, for Maction Bay and Upper, it is usually high. You may find that Upper has 3,000, 4,000, Maction Bay and Kampala Remand. But for women, it is usually around 600, 700. Sometimes it can go up. It can even be lower than the 600. But this 600, you may find we have remandees and we have convicts. These are the people that are still going to court. Yep. They are still facing trial, and then we have convicts.
Whose fate has been decided by court. Yeah.
Yes, they may be convicts when they are interested in lodging an appeal, or they have already lodged an appeal, but they are still convicts.
Right.
And if you to make a rough estimation, these remands, sometimes they're on capital offenses, some on capital, others are on non-capital. Capital, these are it could be like murder, particularly now if you're talking about murder, some on murder, some on aggravated, trafficking, name it in a capital offense. But majority is murder, since it's crimes of passion.
Right.
It's crimes of passion.
But I find that peculiar, that we should have majority of the women who are on capital offense being there because of murder and related to crimes of passion.
Because of the nature of our society, sometimes it contributes to these crimes of passion.
Right.
Just like I mentioned earlier, usually these crimes of passion, they involve spouses. This is a woman that allegedly murdered, because it could be true.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
Yes. Yeah? If you're still on remand, we presume that you're innocent until when you proven guilty, or until when you plead guilty yourself. So what contributes, usually, since there is a relationship involved, it's either marriage, it's either cohabitation, sometimes it's even boyfriend and girlfriend. But in most cases, looking at our society, we are raised, I am a Muganda, we are raised to believe that when you're married, when you're in a relationship, you're supposed to stay. It's a do or die. Even when you're in church, they say,
until death do us part.
Do us apart. This is contributing a lot to these crimes of passion. Let's say this is a lady that is married. Even when you find your husband cheating, we are raised to believe that we are supposed to stay in that marriage because of the kids, because of the societal pressure, that when you leave this marriage, you're deemed like a failure. So what, in the end, this woman, this anger keeps on piling. Remember, these crimes of passion, it's as a result of sudden anger. These are crimes that are deeply rooted in emotions.
Right.
There is no time for cooling off. As and when you find your husband, your boyfriend in the act,
But we might have some which are also
act.
premeditated, no?
Yes, there are those that are premeditated. That is the reason as to why we say you're innocent
Until
proven guilty. Until when? You plead guilty. Because naturally, if you come out and you plead guilty, really, at the back of your mind, you know that you committed the offense.
Let me bring in Counsel Komakech here to help us understand. If you're to define a crime of passion, how would you define it?
Yes, but from the very beginning, our criminal justice system doesn't give us avenue to define that. Our criminal justice system, from the investigation by the police, from your time of arrest and the time that you eventually convicted or acquitted, does not provide avenue for that. What I'm basically trying to say is that, for example, if you have a woman or you have a girl who has been sexually assaulted, the criminal justice system look at her in two ways. She's not even the complainant.
Usually?
Yes. She becomes a witness. And
so if something happened and I was involved, I'm not...
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the second part is that you interface for purposes of getting evidence that you were actually sexually assaulted. That is when you go for medical examination.
Right.
So you find that from the very beginning, the investigation does not give us a chance to define it. We only get to know it that eventually when there are convictions, that yes, you, although of course allegations will be there that she killed the husband because of this and that, or the husband killed her because of this and that. Those are, we're just speculating at that beginning.
Yeah.
But the investigation process does not allow us from the very beginning to define that. If today my wife has a problem with the mother-in-law and my mother-in-law happens to be knocked by a vehicle, we speculate that it is my wife. But the investigation system at the beginning, which is weak, doesn't allow us.
So in an ideal setting, how would you want the investigation process to be to help us in this case?
In another situation, a woman who is accused would be afforded a lawyer at the very beginning.
Is there accused in the first place or suspected in the first place, even before
now,
they are
accused? Now,
accused?
at that point, the society have accused her.
Yeah.
Now, me as a lawyer, I'm saying she's a suspect.
Yeah.
But the society is saying, no, she has done that. So if she's a suspect, let her be given the opportunity of a lawyer to interface what exactly happened. Sometimes, as my colleague was saying, my learned friend, there might be provocation. I was acting in self-defense. Issues of insanity, because you see, issues of mental health come in. I'll be working here, but I'm depressed.
Yeah. And depressed because of things that have happened in a relationship for so long.
People don't know that.
Yeah.
So, from the very beginning, the system fails the suspect. So when the system fails the suspect, we cannot, now we the common people, the lay people, we then convict there and then. So even when you go to the police and they are recording your statement,
there's a bias because
there's not a bias.
Yeah.
So the system, the whole criminal justice system, fails that woman who is a suspect at that point.
Right. I'm now curious to know, because we've talked of, I mean, the percentages of the men and women are quite large. How would you compare maybe estimations, percentages of men who are held on crimes of passion compared to the women?
A woman, by the very nature, would take the highest percentage, because we are usually quick to point fingers
at the woman.
At the woman. As a society, we are very quick. your husband dies in bed, then they say you poisoned the man. You wanted this property from the very beginning.
But when we look at
the percentage actually for women is higher.
Of those who are implicated in crimes of passion.
Yes.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So you mentioned something about how the conviction or how the society makes this person. Now I'm curious to know, for most of the people that you're working with, how do they usually go about the situation when a spouse has died and they are the #1 suspect and they are charged by society, like you mentioned? How do they often go about the cases that you've interfaced with?
So it is usually very hard. Most times we get to interface with these people when they're already in detention. They've already been remanded by a court of law. And then you're only getting to interface with them.
Right.
But then we don't look at, remember our practice as lawyers, we don't go into the past experience you have gone through. So you eventually get that this woman is basically telling you that, look, I have done it. You know, because she has been on remand for the last 6 years. Now, she can't tell you the truth. First of all, I'm a man, I'm interviewing a woman. That's already an issue.
So are you saying it's a point of, even when someone is not guilty, they just say, I'm guilty, just because they feel like everyone judges them as being guilty?
Because the system allows, you see, there's being guilty morally, there's being guilty legally.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. A person might have done something,
right,
but the law provides avenue and say, look, if you are provoked, for example, if she sees me slapping her child, serious slap, and then amidst that situation, she picks up a machete and hits me, the law says that's provocation. Or you are acting in defense of another person.
Yeah, because there are two things. Either you've been provoked or you were defending yourself.
Yes. So in that situation, this woman is looking at herself and saying, for me, I'm not guilty. But the law...
You're still innocent until proven guilty.
So, but also the circumstances the woman has passed through. From the very first time, she has been in remand for the last 6 years. Eventually, she has to actually agree that indeed I've done it.
Right. Councillor Asia, you mentioned something to me earlier that was also quite interesting, that for most of the people that you've interfaced with, they are actually guilty in a sense that they've taken part in this. But of course, he has also broken down there's self-defense, there's provocation. So usually for the people that you've worked with, the clients that you've defended, when they are first maybe arrested or suspected, what do they do?
Thank you. Just like my colleague has highlighted, now, if a woman is arrested, at that moment she's a suspect, while still at police custody. But for us as lawyers, where do we meet them? We meet them while incarcerated.
And I'm imagining all this pressure from the family, the judgment. Yes. So at that point, how do you find them? In what state are they?
They're in a state of anguish. They are in a state of, some are in a state of denial. Some left their children unattended to. They're in a state that you can't even imagine. And just like counsel said here, you usually find these women, this is a woman that has been on remand for 6-8 years without trial. Today is 2022. You find a woman that was arrested in 2004, maybe suspected of having committed murder. She was arraigned in court in 2004, remanded, but still up to now.
And the case was forgotten?
It wasn't, because of the criminal justice. There is a weakness in the criminal justice system on how we handle cases. we need to handle cases expeditiously. That is the principle
And
of
I think
natural
that's why
justice.
they say justice delayed is justice denied.
That's the principle of natural justice. But when we come to practice, you're going to find women that have been on remand for 8 years. Of course, the law says a trial must be conducted. It has to be speedy.
Right.
But what is the reality? What is on the ground? This is a woman that has been on remand for 8 years without trial or without committal to the High Court for trial.
And the women that you're talking about, the demographics, how do they spread out? Because I understand, of course, you may have like the middle class and then the lower class. How are these demographics playing about in these crimes of passion that we're talking about?
Irrespective of the class.
The distribution, do we have any class that might have majority?
Not really.
It's evenly spread out.
It's evenly spread out.
Yeah. So it's regardless of someone's financial status to afford a lawyer, they still are facing the same situation.
Yes, because the nature of our criminal justice system at the moment is that these high court cases are heard in sessions, in criminal sessions. You just don't appear today, your case is adjourned. It has to be a session. Your cause listed for a session, you appear, you're either convicted, you're acquitted, you're discharged, whatever the outcome.
Right.
But it takes long. That is why you may find women that are innocent pleading guilty.
Just because they're very tired of being in
Just
prison.
because, yes, they are tired of being remanded. At least they rather be convicts and they know I am serving my sentence. Maybe in 5 years I am going home, rather than being on remand without knowing, which you don't know when you're leaving, you don't know when you're going to court, you're just there. But that is the system.
Right.
That is the system.
And then you talked about, the system and how it is. I'm also still curious to know when someone wants to serve a sentence and move out, but remember where they've come from. I'm imagining they've been judged very harshly by their family, by their community. So what do you find? Don't you find a sort of predicament between someone wanting to move out of jail, but where do they go?
Yes, that's a big challenge. I have seen them, I've interfaced with them. Maybe this is a woman that was judged by the society that she committed a crime. But when you look at the facts, if you look at the police file, clearly she didn't commit the offense. Here, she comes for trial, she's acquitted. Then she has to leave the prison. Mm-hmm. But where she's going? Where is she going? The society.
So how do you work with your clients to make sure that they are able to go back and are accepted?
Because we lawyers, we are also counselors.
Yeah.
We offer some rehabilitation. Even while they're in prison, they are rehabilitated. Yes, prison is supposed to keep them, but they do that part of rehabilitation for them. That is why if you meet a woman that was remanded in 2004, right now, she's a changed woman. They change while in prison, they are rehabilitated. Sometimes they even learn skills. Like if you go like at Luzira Women, they do crafting, they are churches, they are mosques. So they live.
So if you're innocent, you
Yes.
change from what to what?
If you're innocent, you can develop your skill. You can develop your skill. Or you can remain innocent. But at the moment you leave the prison, at least there is some form of rehabilitation.
Do you find that when women who are released after serving sentences for crimes of passion are able to go back to the same communities, or what are the trends? Do they go back to the same community, or they change to a different community to be able to start a new life?
I would advise for them to go into a different community, because even when you're released here in court, you might be acquitted, but as society, they will just say, that woman, they paid, she's guilty, she killed her husband, we all witnessed. Now the in-laws, the relatives, it is really not good. I wouldn't advise my client to go back into such a community. If there is another option, she should reintegrate into maybe another different kind of setting.
Right. Councillor Komakech, what trends have you observed with the lawyers that you're working with, the clients that you're working with, and even the demographics? We could still go back to the same question. The people that you've worked with, do you find that maybe there might be a trend on the kind of class that they come from? That could be also in terms of access to information, access to finances, to be able to follow their cases through, and also the ability to be able to reintegrate when they come back from prison.
So when the clients we have worked with, their story gets into the media because all don't get into the media because one, they are poor. Few times stories get into the media if a woman is from a higher class.
Right. If the story is very interesting, that there's public interest.
Because she's from a higher class,
Yeah.
that's the first point of it. Because in my previous workplace, we dealt with a situation of that kind. A woman is accused of killing the husband, and they found the body hanged on the tree. But the question you would ask is, how would this woman be able to lift this dead body, or even lift this man and hang the man?
Well, one might say if she had people to do that for her.
And you see, that's what I was telling you. The interesting part is that the issue, and actually the cornerstone of any successful prosecution, depends on the initial investigation. You cannot take a police dog to a crime scene after 3 days and expect to get, you'll find
good results, yeah.
But we do it here. Then we end up picking people who have been at the crime scene.
Yeah.
So I would say that the statistics is not yet known as to whether there are favors on the different classes. But what I can say is that the time something is known is because the class is there. Two, the other point is that, as I was telling you, and I will give an example, that a woman who has been sexually assaulted, she's supposed to go through some psychological and then counseling. But then you find a situation where our government does not have such facilities. And remember, I think SEHAD filed a case, Center for Health, Human Rights and Development filed a case challenging government to put in those shelters. Now with our prisons, we don't have the after. That when you get out of that prison gate,
And you're facing a whole new world.
and you're facing a new world, because things have changed.
True.
The kid you left when was like this, now the kid he has grown. And you as a mother, how are you going to interface with that child? And it's two ways. How can you be integrated into the community, and how can the community integrate
Also
you?
receive you, yeah.
So it's supposed to be a whole concept of the criminal justice system, because it has a huge, group, the police, the judiciary, the law reform, and what. So it's a two-way thing that we need to deal with. Even as suggested by my land friend that the person be taken to another place. Me being in Uganda or being a whatever, and then I'm taken, let's say you go and stay in Kenya. Does it make sense? Your community is your livelihood.
Right.
Your livelihood. So it's a two-way thing that we need to look at it as a country, have a discussion on the same. It's part of the reform on the whole justice sector that we need to have. That Komakech is getting out after 10 years in detention. Is the community ready? Because
To receive.
yes,
to
because
receive
I cannot be punished twice. I was already punished by a court through a conviction, for example. Now, should the community again also punish me?
And unfortunately, I believe that punishment will have to, will stand.
So that's a discussion we need to open up.
You mentioned something about emotions. And I was asking you to qualify what a crime of passion is. Does it have to be something that happens in the heat of the moment when something has happened, or even when it's, you know, like maybe someone has suffered gender-based violence for such a long time, or they've been oppressed in different ways, and then they plan a way out and end up, you know, locking themselves up by the act that they do? Is that still defined as a crime of passion, or it just becomes something else?
It's actually two ways, both instant and because, and as I told you in the beginning, that we always point fingers at women very quickly. You find a girl who constantly was actually subjected to sexual abuse by the family members for a long time. Every time she wants to report the same, we close her up. Say, don't bring it up.
That's your uncle.
That's
Maybe
your
that's
uncle.
the breadwinner.
He's going to go to jail, and then whatever. Now, if this lady eventually wakes up one day and kill the person, what would you do? But our criminal justice system doesn't look at
the history of how that came to be,
of what happened. I can tell you, I had several situations where you're having a girl is reporting to you that the father is actually defiling me. And we, as a lawyer, it is difficult for me to first of all interview, because sometimes I break into tears and I cry. But then they're saying, you bring evidence
of the defilement.
Of the defilement.
Yeah.
And you can't. But also, you look at how we do our criminal justice system. We even mention your name. Akelo Sarah
has been defiled by the father.
Has been defiled.
Yeah, I remember someone called us out as the media for mentioning names of even rape victims. Yeah.
So that's where the situation is. So it is two ways. You find that there has been something which has been happening, but which we are sweeping it
under the carpet.
Under the carpet.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it happens very instantly, that a husband tries to have a sexual relationship or have sex with the wife, and the wife has just given birth, you know, after 2 days. And the woman in the midst of that situation gets anything which is there and hit. The person dies. But we all want to look at the situation that this man was attempting to rape.
But in that case, there are only two people and there's only one person who can tell the story.
Yes. But you see, and that's the interesting part, that at that point, how are you handled? So you find the media has already put woman kill husband. No, the woman is taken to the police, and the police has read that newspaper. Oh, the interview becomes something else. You killed. Without understanding.
Right. So how would you, and usually when I had taken you to the question of when that happens, how would you advise someone to go about that? If maybe in the heat of a moment something happens, what would be the better way to handle this?
It depends on the situation that the person is.
Like the two examples you've given,
yes,
of this child who's been defiled by the father, or a woman who recently gave birth and is being forced into a sexual relationship, yes, with a husband. So
now I'm going to give you 4 things. And I'm going to borrow it from the other side, the triple AQ framework. Mm-hmm. Access, availability, affordability, and equality. Can this woman access a lawyer?
And I think that's a very important point.
Is it available? There are some districts which they have no law firms in this country. Is it affordable? at that point. If it's affordable, what's the quality? Now that one determines everything which is going to be done. You find that there is access to a lawyer, but it's not affordable. There is access, but there is no quality. So that one there, if you get it and bring it in the justice system, will it determine what will happen for that woman at that point?
Okay, so in this case, if someone doesn't have access or availability, what do they do? Or they may not even know that they need a lawyer.
Now that one there, we leave it to fate. You leave it to fate, and then you take the natural course. Ideally, the state has the mandate to protect and promote and then uphold the rights. Now, protecting the right is that you protect an individual against another person.
Right.
To promote, it means that you put in laws which can enable them to enjoy.
If I'm to go to Council Asia, some of the work that you do, or the work that you do, involves a lot of advocacy. So are you the ones who are now picking up the people who do not have access? Because in the AAA that you mentioned, when the first A is not available, everything else goes downhill. How are you able to choose the clients that you're working with?
How we choose our clients? First of all, Justice Defenders, we are a non-government organization, and what do we do? It's criminal justice, and it's entirely pro bono. This is entirely pro bono work. But before you become our client, we have what we call a means and merit test. Because these are the services that are free, surely they should be only for the poor, the vulnerable community.
Those who deserve, which we call merit, yeah?
Those that deserve our services. So we will visit these prisons of operation. We have our paralegals that are attached, that some are serving officers, some are inmates, that identify their own. Let's say this is an accused person that can't afford counsel. You go, you speak to our paralegal, you're registered as our client, and then a file is opened for you, and then it is forwarded to the lawyers to represent you in court. But that is, at the moment, it is applicable to accused persons that are undergoing trial in these lower courts. Because as per the law, if you're in a capital offense, you're charged with a capital offense, let's say murder, the state is mandated to provide legal representation.
Right.
Yes. Sometimes called the state brief scheme. We have what we call the state brief lawyers. So if you're facing trial on a capital offense, the state has to provide, it's mandated to provide legal representation. Or if you can afford private counsel, yes, your lawyer will defend you. But as and when you can't afford private counsel, the state has to provide you with a lawyer. That's what counsel was talking about when it comes to quality. Because I can give you an example. If a client is on a murder charge, let's say a woman is on a murder charge, and this is a woman that cannot afford hiring a private lawyer. Just like I told you, these cases are had in sessions. This is a criminal session that maybe the cause list could be having like 80 cases, and these cases are going to be heard in 30 days. You will find like there are 3 state brief lawyers or 2, and each lawyer has been assigned 25 files, 30. This is a session that is going to happen within a period of 30 days. I am a lawyer, I've been assigned 25 files. Where is the time? I have 25 clients. These clients are on remand. Let's say I've been assigned these 25 clients today. The session is beginning. Today is Tuesday, on Monday. Trial is commencing on Monday. Where do I get into time to interview, to get to know my client's case? That's where the quality part comes in. You'll find a lawyer going to court, but you've never met your client because you're providing this representation at the expense of the state. You'll go to court. You don't know your client. Or even the client does not know that he or she has a lawyer.
Right.
But trial is commencing. You'll see a lawyer talking to the accused person in the dock. What's your name? Yes. What's your case? But cases.
So that's some of the common mistakes maybe that we're seeing.
That affects the quality. That
Okay.
affects the quality of the representation. You'll find that there is no agreed points between the lawyer and.
So if we
And
were to go
accused.
to the crime of passion in particular, what works and what doesn't work if you want to get justice? And maybe, I don't know, usually for the cases that you have, who usually reports? Is it the community? Is it the family? Is it the state itself that picks up the accused persons? Usually, what are the trends that you're observing?
Who reports? It depends. There are cases that are committed in the public. There are cases that will be committed against the complainant alone, like the example you gave. This is a crime of passion, maybe. This is a man and a woman.
They're
This-
alone
yes,
in their house,
yes.
there's no one, and the person dies. So if the woman just comes and says, my husband has died,
Who reports? Who is the victim? Usually there is a victim who in turn becomes the complainant or the state witness. So when we go to court, there is always a complainant.
So when something happens in the private of this couple's house, what happens?
It all goes back to the investigations because these are two people. It's a crime. Maybe this is a lady. He murders or allegedly
Murdered.
murdered the husband. Who reported? Because there has to be somebody that reported. If it's because usually you find women after committing the crime, you report yourself. Because this is a crime of passion, you didn't intend. Because what is the logic behind
Do they often report?
Yes, you'll find those that report.
Is that the
Yes.
case that you see, that most of them report themselves?
Not most, but there is a percentage.
That reports?
Yes.
What usually happens when something happens in the private of someone's home? Do they take off? Do they stay and just tell relatives someone has died by falling? What happens?
It all depends on each case is handled on its own.
Yeah.
It all is depend on the circumstances surrounding. You'll find those that will talk off and will later be arrested by police. You'll find those that will go and report immediately. This happened. I killed my husband. This is what happened.
As a lawyer, what do you advise if something happens? Maybe this child, like you mentioned, mistakenly pushes off someone and they maybe hit a bedpost and they die. What do you advise them to do? Knowing the community that we are also living in, where you'll be judged by people and maybe thrown out as an outcast.
No, first, going back to who reports and whatever, depends on every circumstances. Unless the body is probably put in an acid and then eventually disappears. But usually a dead body smells. So the owner of the, the neighbors, like, something's not right. Or if you're in rentals and together, the caretaker might notice. Say, but how come Komaka is not getting out of his house? Then they would take a step to either go to the local authorities, then they pick up from there. But the advice probably would be that is to give a statement. What exactly happened?
Even when you might be judged by police.
Yes. And that statement is, can I have my lawyer around to give that? But the system we are in sometimes does not allow you to. By the time your lawyer comes, police would have taken your statement already. But the ideal situation would be that we deal with, we allow that your lawyer comes and then you make a statement. Because the implication of every word you say, it's there. Did I push? Did I do what? It's always there. So you would probably advise that the person takes that statement. But also sometimes, in another situation, would advise your client to first run.
Okay.
Because the community would want to lynch you up.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a very short break. We're still discussing crimes of passion here, basing on the fact that majority of the inmates in Zero prison are there because of crimes of passion. And when we come back, we'll also be discussing what are the telltale signs that this relationship you're in may turn acrimonious, and how can you avoid that so that you're not on the other side of the law. You're watching Month of the Woman here in CTV. We'll be right back.
CTV is now on StarTimes. You can now catch all your favorite programs, our daily comprehensive news bulletins, and so much more on StarTimes channel number 248. Stay tuned for a world of endless possibilities. CTV. Don't blink.
Don, Rajo get a mazin again, Tima. But you man ain't no tell me kida.
Every time it clocks 11 a.m. on CTV, we bring you the only certified morning party, the branch request.
So I would love to listen to everything. Then you put your hand, go work.
If you believe it, say amen. If you believe it, say amen.
I would like to listen to Toast by Coffee.
My fire.
Shiba.
Yes.
So my name is Starbunting.
Now showing on CTV. Don't blink. Love sports? We do too. We got you covered. The Sports Dish, your daily lunchtime sports show that serves the intrigue, breaks down the act, and gives you an in-depth analysis of the odds. Who's going up? Who's going down? Catch all the thrilling action right here on the Sports Dish with Clive Chazé. Coming soon on CTV. Don't blink.
Welcome back from that short break, and thank you for keeping it CTV. You're still watching Month of the Woman, which is special programming that we are bringing you this month to celebrate women, but also to empower them on matters that affect them in society. And today, we're talking about crimes of passion, something that usually affects everyone in a relationship and is masked in a lot of contexts, like one of our panelists has already told us. So I want to bring to your question, you had mentioned something interesting earlier before we went on a break, on having cases that are leaked to the media, and I believe maybe that makes your cases more complicated. How do you handle cases where maybe the perpetrators are powerful and maybe they are threats because you're trying to defend someone who is, of course, judged as guilty by society, but we do not know because the law has not yet proven them innocent or guilty?
So it's in every case, in the first place. But you see, the more you have gaps, or the more you have delays in the trial system, you get to face those situations. So it's on a case-by-case basis and depends on the level of the threat. The threat may not be against you as a lawyer or your client, but might be against the possible witnesses. So if along the way, and the system takes long, a person eventually gets to lose interest as a witness. What am I going to do in court? The threats are there. sometimes you have to pull out of the case for your own safety.
Has that happened often to you?
No. For the matters that I'm handling and whatever, I've not had those situations. But where I've had the situation is that clients, I mean the witnesses, your witnesses, who would have given evidence in support of your client, of this woman, eventually they lose interest in following up. Say, every time we go to court, it's adjourned, it's adjourned, it's adjourned.
To the challenges of the justice system.
So the justice system allows that threat to come in, and the threat to, to continue.
Right.
A person might call you and threaten you today, but he's not going to threaten you the next week. But along the way, the system, creates all that situation.
Have you had instances where the family is actually supportive, or usually what happens very often with the clients that you work with? Do you find it common that maybe family is with you, or it's not? Because this is it's a case that brings stigma.
Now, before she comes in, the case of the woman I was telling you about, you understand that from the investigation we did ourselves.
Is that the woman who had just given birth?
No, the woman who apparently was accused of killing the husband.
Right.
And part of what we learned is that she had a disagreement with her stepsons from the other side.
Yeah.
But they happen to live in the same village, same locality.
Okay, so she had a disagreement with the stepsons,
Yes.
and then the man happened to die.
The man happened to die.
Okay.
And then, so the family members were divided.
On whether it had been premeditated.
Her kids against the other side.
Right.
The other side again is here that you have killed our father. So, in situation on crime of passion, families are always divided.
True.
It's going to be a few people who will support, say that.
And stand with you, yeah.
And stand with you. But most likely, high chances that everyone who is coming from the other side is going to testify against the woman.
How do you gather evidence? Because now there's a lot of emotions. There are lots of emotions involved, because we're talking about passion. So there's passion from the relatives or the family or the community and whoever. How do you usually, compared to other cases, how do you usually deal with the evidence in here?
So it's just like in a normal case. But you see, our law is that if you allege, you give me the evidence. Mm-hmm. They also says that give me the evidence you intend to rely on against my client.
Which takes us back to who reported the case.
Now the state has to give you evidence they intend to rely on. You see, ideally, as a defense lawyer, I would have to go and do my own investigation by hiring a private investigator. But remember, the client I'm dealing with doesn't have that money. Or sometimes I'm on state brief, as she said.
Yeah.
But ideally, I'm supposed to do my own investigation. And then the state also has to give me what they want to intend to rely on. The witnesses, statements. They're saying there is a gun. They're saying there is a poison here. You see, a copy of the postmortem report. All those things, so they have to give me. But ideally, I'm supposed to do my own investigation also.
Right.
But which in the situation I'm dealing with, I can't. I'm meeting my client for the first time in court. My client is poor. Probably she cannot even pay my transport. So, unless she comes from the NGO world, so they have some funds.
Actually, to add on what Councillor has said, yes, there are so many challenges within the justice system. When it comes to hearing of a case, me as a defense lawyer, it is not my duty to prove the case. The duty rests on the prosecution, the state, to prove beyond reasonable doubt that this woman actually committed the case.
Yeah.
Procedure is, state is mandated to provide me with all the evidence he or she intends to rely on throughout the trial.
And usually there'll be the murder that has happened or the death that has happened, and then depending on the circumstances, then you break it down to the different cases, maybe manslaughter, you know.
Yes, let me, if maybe the case is murder, all the documents state intends to rely on. We have forms, like, okay, maybe the police form, where they medically examine the accused person to actually prove that he's fit to stand for trial. If it's murder, there has to be a postmortem report. Usually that's a document where we agree. It's an agreed document. Yes, there was death. But usually the issue in contestation is who committed the crime, who caused the death. Was it this woman before court or not? Yeah. Because death occurred and there is a postmortem report, except if this postmortem report maybe wasn't signed, it is not dated, but for as long as it's within the law, it's an agreed document, you agree as lawyers, state and defense, on that postmortem report, then the issue to be tried by court is who committed? Is it the accused that unlawfully caused the death?
What's the reality on ground? How often do we rely on postmortem reports?
Postmortem report is basically it's an evidence that a person died. Yeah,
it's an evidence, but how often do we rely on it in these cases? What's the reality? Because you're the ones who are dealing with these cases right now.
Actually, it has nothing. We always rely on them. But as my land friend was saying, the participation of my client.
It only proves that death occurred. The person named in the postmortem report died. A and A died on this date, the body was examined, the cause of death is, but the issue is participation of the accused person. The accused before court, is he the one that unlawfully caused the death of this person yeah, named in the report? That is now the contestation.
Okay, I now want to bring you to, there's something called the boiling frog syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of it, where they say there's a problem, but the person involved fails to act on it earlier, and that eventually leads them to, you know, committing something, which is what you hinted on when we started the show about how our cultures shape us to stick in relationships till death do us part. So having dealt with the cases, what are the commonest telltale signs that this relationship might end up taking one party to jail?
So, and I will still make this submission that one, we have a colonial justice system or criminal justice system. If we can go back, we were dealing with issues concerning marriage and divorce. And people made noise. How do you have a marriage and divorce law? But we have those laws. We are trying to put them in one book. And they are very old laws. The law is telling you that you should prove 3 things if you want your marriage to be dissolved formally. They're saying adultery, desertion, and whatever. But you see, the context in which we are dealing with now with these things, that where 2 people who have been living together can no longer live, what should we do? How should the law? So the law fails. The law fails a woman who is apparently in a relationship which is abusive. Even when she's in that relationship, the law is still telling her, you prove that your husband actually is committing adultery. You have to go and hire somebody and enter a hotel and find them having sex. That is where we're having an issue. That is the sign. And she talked about culture. Yeah. That you cannot be seen that a man is crying in public. So where should a man cry? You see, we need to deal with this in the whole context of everything. So where you see the thing is failing, it begins from the very law which regulates it. That you enter into a relationship, you have kids, but the marriage is not working. Now what should we do? The law is saying, you first prove this before
So in other words, you're saying we need to put in place a law that opens a door. If something is not working, house is on fire, walk out.
It is for us to actually discuss it and say, look, if these things are not working, we have children here. If they're below, who are they going to stay with? Who is going to pay their school fees? Along that marriage, we had acquired some properties. How should it be divided? How should it be managed? And then people move on.
Right.
You have seen all this happening in the US and what? People move without killing somebody. You see, that boiling point now, you are sitting in a situation where you want a solution, but you cannot be given. I'd rather kill the husband. I'd rather kill my wife.
So that you have a way out.
Yes, because the society cannot listen. The law cannot give you that avenue.
Right. Councillor Asia, what happens, or from the clients that you've seen, where you say this relationship, from how we are looking at it and from the clients we've had, might lead to someone being behind bars if something is not done?
For me, I think it's a case-by-case analysis. Just like Council has highlighted, usually these crimes of passion, these are crimes that are deeply rooted in emotions, and they usually involve spouses. So that means there has to be a relationship. It could either be marriage, it could either be cohabitation, it could be girlfriend and boyfriend, whatsoever, name it. But there has to be an existing relationship between these two people. Right now there is a law. At least there is a law. But I think the problem is with society, how we are raised, our cultures, how we are raised. Just like I mentioned earlier, we are raised to believe that, let's give an example, today you get married. Even when you get married to an abusive man, just after 5 months, whether he's abusive, cheating, any kind of character, bad character, you can't just leave his home because of either the society or the parents. Even when you go and talk to your mother might sit you down and say, you see, I've been married for 40 years, but your father has been doing this, this, and this, and this. What are we going to tell the society? Your auntie, your what, everything.
Because marriage is an honor, so you should stay in it.
It's like some people take marriage as an achievement, so you have to maintain that achievement. You can't get out of that relationship. But just like what Council was saying, I think the discussion should be on empowering women. That you are at liberty to live.
And
yes,
men as well.
Just like marriage, there is consent of both parties. Because where there is an element of force or coercion, the marriage is void.
So for the marriages or the relationships where we've been told you have to expect hardships, from the legal point of view, and since you're dealing with people who are behind bars, what are those things where you would tell someone and say, if you see this is a red flag, move before something bad happens?
I think usually those are decisions that are made by that is a decision that can only be made by the woman herself. Something might be a red flag to me, but to another woman, it is okay. For me, I might consider cheating as a red flag. Then I mentioned this woman that when you see this man cheating, it's a red flag. This woman says,
or maybe
for us here in Uganda,
or we can address how it makes them feel. If you feel a certain way, then you know you're heading towards a certain point.
For me, I think I can advise a woman that if you reach a certain extent that you just about to commit a crime.
So how do you know that you may just be about to commit a crime?
Because we are dealing with crimes of passion. It's emotions. And these are crimes that happen as a result of sudden anger. Usually, there are circumstances.
Yeah, because the anger is built up. It doesn't just happen. Yeah.
Because the anger is built up, you will know that I have reached. I can't go
any further. So
if you reach such extent, I would advise such a woman to
leave. So Komakech, what would you say are the telltale signs where you feel like, from speaking to this person, I feel like they've got to the end of the road, and anything beyond that might now result into crime?
That's a difficult question, because what is good to me might not be good to you. But as a lawyer, I stick to my law and advise that where you see the relationship is not going anywhere, please, if you're not married, move on. If you are in a lawful marriage, file for divorce and move on. But a situation a person is passing through, I cannot basically tell so much and advise them, because I would probably tell you that if they have not given you food, you go and cry. We all have the way we express, but as a lawyer, legal, I would basically tell you, if you are in a marriage lawfully, file for divorce. If you are not legally married, move on. If you are legally married and you think you want breathing space, go into what they call separation. Have a separation agreement, or you file for judicial separation to give you time to cool.
And legally, because you want to stick with the law, we'll come to that a little. There's menswear in the law. Your consideration for that?
One cannot act without the other. There must be the mind and the act. So if you have the mind, there is no act, you are legally not guilty.
I'll take this back to Councillor Asia. He mentioned something about if you're legally married and not legally married, but we know the society that we're living in right now, we do have a lot of people in relationships where they're not legally bound, but somehow they still cannot live. Why do you think that is so?
Still, that will go back to personal decision because of the society or because of how some women take their marriages. Because if, let's say, there is marriage, there is cohabitation. Legally, cohabitation, you're not married.
You're free to leave.
You're free to leave at any point in time. But if you're married, the law provides you with an option. If you're tired, you can apply for divorce. And at least there are legal implications of divorce. Let's say maybe there is property, there is children, we shall talk about custody, now property sharing, if you are married. But when it comes to which option to take, me as a lawyer, I can only advise, and my advice must be within the law. I can give you an example. I've ever handled why it is so hard to make a decision for somebody. We only advise, lawyers, we only advise, then a client makes his or her own decision. I've ever handled a divorce. This was a woman that had petitioned for divorce. The man could cheat, and cheat. Every time you go back to your home, you find a woman in the marital bed. She found women, different women. The man could hire women as maids, pretending that this is a maid. Yet actually this is a girlfriend. So this woman petitioned for divorce. She was crying in court. Every time you could go to court, she's crying. She's so done with this man. Right now, they are together. They are back with a man. So if you make a decision for that client, they will always say, you're the one.
Have you been blamed before by a client?
Actually, sometimes they even tell you, are you interested in my man? Yes, they ask those questions. Right. Why are you advising me to do that? Yeah? Are you interested in my man? Right now, they are back together. So for we as lawyers, we can only advise. This is what the law says. You choose. You as the woman or you as the client before me.
Right. So those are the tips that you're giving us on how not to get on the wrong side of the law because of a relationship going sour. But she had also mentioned some other things that we need to know when something happens and maybe someone finds themselves in such a situation, or even the appeal that you are making to how we can better the justice system. And we do have a lot of people who are watching us and they come from, diverse backgrounds and they do different things. If there's anything that you'd wish for someone to change out there so that we don't have more people locked up because of crimes of passion, because we don't want to lose people, and especially women caught up in situations where we wouldn't wish them to do, what are some of those, what is that appeal that you would make and to whom would you make it?
From my side, my appeal would first be to government. Government has the primary responsibility to protect, which means that it is supposed to prevent third parties from violating one person's right. So it should protect a woman's right from being violated by the husband. Should promote, put in legislations which actually work.
And you had given us examples of legislations that work?
The legislations, we have a marriage act or marriage laws which are so old, I think from 1940s.
Colonial era.
We need to have a conversation on those laws now.
I think we've started the conversation. Is this part of that?
As a country, yes. But then the other part is that government also should uphold, and upholding government should not violate the rights. And by violation, the women who are already in Luzira because of these crimes of passion, a number of them are not yet convicts. They have not yet faced the justice itself, but they have been in detention for long. So, from the pre-trial, you have a system which says when you commit an offense, for example, murder, you are taken before the magistrate's court just for purposes of the charge being read to you. And you're not allowed to say anything. Then you're taken back.
Like she mentioned.
You're remanded.
For
then
years, yeah?
Yes, you stay in there. And even when you eventually commit it. So government should uphold those rights, should refrain from violating, should actually organize the criminal justice system so that I am still unaccused until I have pleaded guilty or until you have proven. But how do I plead guilty? It means that the system is also good. Because sometimes I plead guilty because the system has blockage in them.
Just like she mentioned earlier, because someone is frustrated, yeah?
So the other second part is that as the community, or no, to the media, is that let us investigate before making certain statements, before convicting somebody. You don't know what that newspaper headlines does or its impact on prosecution of such a woman. And then lastly, the community should understand that a person, as power law, you are still innocent until you are proven guilty.
Just to maybe shed more light on that, you've talked about that newspaper headline and how much it means. How would you want media to report on such cases, for example, because something peculiar has happened in their community, someone has died, and it has to be reported about. It's a crime. How would you wish for it to be phrased in a way that it doesn't compromise the justice of someone?
Me, I would basically, and give two examples. Woman kill husband. Woman allegedly killed. Those are two different statements. The allegedly, it means that you are giving the woman a benefit of doubt. Say that in the circumstance, at this point we don't know. But also, we should not just, as a media, aim at breaking stories. Everyone wants to break stories these days, but without going deep.
Right.
Those are the two things.
Okay, and when you're pursuing that case, because I believe maybe sometimes depending on which side you're falling on, how the media covers that story might help you to also, I see Councillor Asia is just changing her face.
No, the media is important.
Yeah.
In helping, in trying to bring, for example, if this is a woman who has been accused and has been in remand for the last 6 years, it is important that her plight is whatever brought out, her trial is brought out. But we should, you find that, you say, for example, let's say Lydia Duaru, then you start reporting and say she has a 6-year-old, for example, but then you go ahead and mention the name, Kelo Lydia. Why would you want to bring the name of that minor into a trial.
Right.
That doesn't come up.
Okay. I saw you shaking your head earlier when you talked about media helping in bringing justice. What was in your mind?
I think media bringing justice, it's a two-way traffic.
Yeah.
The person before court is presumed innocent.
Until proven guilty, yeah?
Or until when that person pleads guilty. But usually the headlines we see, Asia murdered A, B, and D. This is affecting this person's presumption of innocence. But just like counsel has highlighted, let's say if this woman has been on remand for a long period, if such a case is highlighted and brought to the media, maybe that could be of an advantage. Not per se to help with her case, but at least in the administration of justice. For a fair trial, which must be speedy and expeditious, it will work within that regard. When I go back to my recommendation, that was the earlier question. If it's maybe to a woman, I would only advise that woman, if you see the red flags, and those red flags vary. I cannot mention that if you see this, and this.
It depends on where you've come from. And how
it depends on where you came from. How do you perceive it? There is always an option. You're at liberty to leave, to avoid committing a crime.
But we've seen in these cases that leaving is usually not easy because there are circumstances that hold people back.
Yes, there are circumstances, maybe like kids, maybe society, the family. That's why we are here, to advocate, to empower those women that are currently facing such challenges, to stand up for themselves. Because really, if you're the one facing that challenge, I cannot better understand your problem. I can only advise, but you know what you're facing. So if you're at a limit, you feel like you cannot go further, you leave. You leave. There is always life after marriage, after cohabitation, after a relationship. Because you'd rather stay not married to this man rather than being in prison for maybe committing murder. If my recommendation to the government, it could be, let us uphold the principles of natural justice. If a woman is arrested, it could be even a man. Why should you arraign that person in court if investigations are not complete? You investigate your case, let investigations are complete, arraign that person in court, either remand him and then adjourn this case for trial, rather than this accused person is appearing in court. These lower courts, formation, just like counsel said, you appear formation like 2 years. Then if you're lucky, you're committed now to the High Court for trial. Then you can be on committal for like 5 years without trial. That is effective, whether you're guilty or not. But what is the highlight? You're presumed innocent. What is the law saying? Let this trial be speedy. I'm either convicted or acquitted. If I'm guilty, convict me. Still I have remedies under the law. I can either apply for bail pending appeal, I can appeal, and then apply for bail pending appeal. If I am satisfied with the judgment of court, I serve my sentence. If I am not satisfied, I appeal. If I'm acquitted, I go. I've ever seen an accused person that was on remand for 9 years on murder. This was a man. Then when we went for trial, the DPP entered and nolly withdraw the charges after 9 years. And it does not come with any form of compensation. You have served your 9 years, you have wasted a lot of time, the DPP withdraws charges. Then you go, yes, you have left, but you have wasted the 9 years in prison. So the idea should be, let the trial be speedy.
Right. You had mentioned something earlier about society and family. For, say, the mothers and the relatives of people who have relationships, and that, I mean, that's every one of us. What tips would you say, or what advice would you give to us not to encourage people to push them into acrimonious relationships?
I think if I'm a mother and my daughter is in an abusive relationship, surely it wouldn't be prudent of me to advise my daughter to stay in that marriage or that relationship. We as parents or relatives should be empowered enough to properly advise these women that are facing challenges. Advise that woman to leave, or there are various options. Because usually in a local family setting, when you're faced with such challenges, usually men are called, there are family meetings, it's a process.
Which may not be the case with a woman if you disrespect your spouse.
That's where the challenge comes in. And actually the problem is, even as women ourselves, do you know that we judge our fellow women? The moment a woman allegedly commits a crime, it's the women on it. This woman was allegedly found cheating. If you look at that, it is the majority are the women condemning it. But if it's a man, and the man is say, those things, it is okay.
Men will be men.
Men will always be men. So even as women, we should stand for our fellow women. We shouldn't judge we should be slow. We should be slow in the process.
What words are you telling your daughter right now as she's growing up to empower her not to fall in such a situation where she's respected rightfully, like you mentioned in the beginning?
I think one of the things I'm trying to do is to basically, first of all, make myself present as a father to my daughter. So even when I leave home early, but I know on a weekend I know that I have to be with her. Part of the situation we have is that we have absentee fathers, absentee mothers, and the economic situation has changed. So the time parents get to meet their children is over the weekend, but both the two parents are on the laptop finishing assignment. Now you find we become apart from each other. You don't know what your daughter is passing through. You don't know what your wife is passing through. Even your wife doesn't know what you're passing through. So that then becomes a gap. My advice would be that let's create time for each other. We know we are looking for money and what, but if we have that weekend, or can we go to church together? Or can we go to the mosque together? You know? Or can we go to the birthday party together? So the challenge is the society has changed, and then it becomes hard to know what exactly each of us are passing through.
Right.
So that communication gap now starts creating suspicion, tension, you know. And then you find that you're not giving enough time to your wife is not giving enough time. Then you start having, she's cheating, he's cheating. That gap is there. The communication now becomes hard. So I think outside the legal world is that we should go back and create time for each other. Back then, you have your parents. At least you go to church together. And you see the father is also going.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a very powerful message that you're giving us, that even creating time for your family can help to reduce crimes of passion or create very healthy relationships which can reduce on chances of having crimes of passion. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation and for being here with us. We've been discussing, our discussion was based on the fact that much as we have just 4.4% of women being inmates in our prisons right now as of January 2022. Majority of those women are there because they've been implicated in charges or with charges that involve murdering their spouses. And the discussion has given us tips on how to ensure that the women out there especially do not find themselves on the wrong side of the law because of keeping up so much that eventually leads them to snapping. CTV Month of the Woman continues tomorrow, so see you then. But we also have more programming lined up for you. We have Brunch Request coming up at the top of the hour. And also don't miss what the newsroom is preparing for you. We shall have Luganda News and Jube Golobi at 7 p.m. and PM edition at 9 p.m. I've been your host, Amelia Martha Nachtimbo. Goodbye.